Good evening, everyone. It's indeed a pleasure to be on this session with all these pioneers in real estate. The topic is quite interesting, but also I think 45 minutes is too short considering it's real estate, it's infrastructure, challenges and opportunities, and especially during pandemic time. We'll try to give overview and I would request my speakers to be as crisp and short on all these questions so that we can provide maximum information that we can share with our attendees. I think straight away, let me go to the questions. Since this is broad and real estate and infrastructure sector has to be covered, I think my question would be, what are the basic challenges that are being faced by both infrastructure and real estate sector, not only in terms of developer, but also from lender's perspective? If Gopal, you can start with your response, and maybe Praveen, you can also respond to this question. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dinesh. Yeah, this pandemic has, as I was watching the previous session, it's really thrown up a lot of challenges in all the sectors. It has affected every, I would say, sphere of business, individuals, government, banks, and the lenders at all levels. But just restricting myself only to the real estate, I must say, from the developer's perspective, there were 3 or 4, I think, important challenges that we really were facing. One was there was a total standstill in sales. It really, there was a sudden stoppage, sudden halt. Secondly, the payments from the customers were really affected. The liquidity was really affected. Third was our ability to, retain the labor to carry on the construction over there. The rules and regulations that were issued from time to time to enable us to resume the construction. That again was another challenge that the developer was facing. And I would say controlling costs, because on one hand, the developer, had his own site which was in progress. There was certain manpower which was there, which cannot be used even for construction. The employees, they continue to receive the salaries. That was a huge challenge, how to control the costs. Similarly, from the individual's perspective, I would say, or the customer's perspective, they also were facing a lot of uncertainty in all respects about their own business or retention of their jobs. They had the challenge whether to continue with a contract to purchase a property or not. And finally, the interest payments to the lenders for the loans that they had taken to acquire the. From the lender's perspective, of course, it's the same. I would say is a replica for them is to recover the loans from the customers, from the developers, ensuring that they receive the payments in time. But there was one more person also, I think, who would be affected, would have been affected by this, has been affected by it, is the government, the government's ability to recover taxes and then again deploy that money back into the economy for the development of it. So I must say the pandemic has thrown up a lot of challenges, but how, I must say, the developers have been able to come out, the lenders have also come forward, as also the government helping each of them in some perspective. Yeah, that's it, I must say. So from the challenge perspective, yeah.
Thanks, Gopal. Over to you, Praveen. And in addition to this, I think there has been a substantial increase in the cost of construction as well. Affected the developer as well as lenders are confused whether to infuse more funds or in themselves. So I think that dilemma is also affecting the sector somewhere or the other.
Absolutely. I think all that Gopal said is absolutely relevant. And see the real estate sector. It is just about a couple of years back after when RERA was introduced, the whole concept and the endeavor was to build that trust deficit which existed. And in the last 1.5 years, with the pandemic and the increase in cost of construction, the non-clarity on the way force majeure would operate, all of that again has been a huge setback for the sector. If you take a look at the recent BCG report, while 70% of the consumers really said they're aware about RERA, but when they were asked about the specific RERA benefits or how much they really understood it, only 14% out of those 70% had visited a RERA website, and 76% said that they were not really satisfied. So what does that really say about the real estate sector is there is, on a developer perspective, a lot of legislation, a lot of compliance that was never really being done before. But the consumers don't really analyze that data or understand the data to arrive at a well-informed decision to purchase that home. So irrespective of the pandemic or not, if we just talk of a period of the last 1.5 years and what are the opportunities or what are the challenges going forward that we do need to address for this sector, there is still no uniform adoption across the states, whether in terms of IT, whether in terms of the appellate tribunals. So that uniformity in process for registration also for a developer, and as a pan-India presence, which Mahindra has, when you're dealing with registration and compliance in multiple states, it does get pretty challenging and complex because each state has different circulars, notifications, registration formats, compliance requirements, which makes it that much more cumbersome to manage it on a pan-India basis. The other problem is that because that single window clearance for construction still doesn't exist, there's no real judgment where delay compensation has been attributable to authorities for delaying, say, an occupation certificate. We really haven't seen much movement on that in spite of the UN cry from all developers. And just before the pandemic in Feb 2020, when the NCLAT gave the reverse resolution plan, it really threw up a different perspective, which is yet to be seen because of COVID. It's gone slow again, about a promoter having an opportunity to participate as a lender in that process, or the IRP allotting flats, unsold flats, to be able to complete the project. So there is all that kind of opportunity. So there have been measures for stamp duty, etc., smaller things which have really happened. Or if you even take in 2019 the amendments to Specific Relief Act or Arbitration Act, but there's a lot that really needs to be done to address the issues in the sector.
Okay, thank you. I think that's really helpful, and I think you have rightly pointed about RERA's role. I think my next question would be on that, and from Shivals and Rajivan. Do you think RERA has played a role in mitigating the effect which has been caused by pandemic on both, of course, only on real estate sector, infrastructure has nothing to do with RERA. But do you think RERA has played any role in mitigating the impact of pandemic on this sector?
Thanks, Dinesh. And I think a good evening to all the participants, and thanks to Legal for organizing this panel. To start with, I will say that, first of all, RERA, you have to look at it as an act came as a positive stuff. Keeping in mind, there are 4 important elements why this act came into existence. I will say the first is transparency and disclosure by developers. Number 2 was restriction of movement of funds out of the project. The third was layout changes and building changes happening without the consent of the flat buyers. And lastly, a new redressal mechanism for the customers to come across with an authority for a complaint. There was a challenge to the validity of the act, and the Bombay High Court in the Neel Kamal judgment validated this entire, the bias of the act was questioned, and we got into it. Having kept this horizon, I believe that as we move along, definitely any sector that is regulated starts with a challenge, because also pushback from the existing players not to have any regulation. So under any regulatory, whether you call it telecom, media, airports, you always have something called a strict regulation to going to forbearance. So as it starts, the challenge comes. So if I have to crystallize the issues that are challenged and whether the government and RERA are putting any answer to it, I will say from a developer's perspective, there is a compliance challenge. And number two challenges is the challenges with certain issues on the agreement for sale. One is what happens if a customer cancels? There's a mandatory registration of an agreement currently at 10%. And if doesn't make a payment and we have to terminate him, he needs to come and do a deed of cancellation, especially in the Western states. So that's one challenge. How do you sell a apartment already sold and not cancelled by the customer who was terminated either way? So on that, I will say a better thing happened is that the RERA has come with a consultation committee on what changes should happen in an agreement. I was speaking about MahaRERA in Bombay, in Maharashtra. So they have come with a committee to recommend changes to that. It's all the stakeholders, whether it's the customers, whether it's the lenders, banks, all are coming together to get this out. So second important aspect you have to look at, would look at from a lender's perspective. From a lender, I think a distressed asset and a developer going delinquent is a big challenge. How do you address that? When you're going to get a new developer, I think the challenge is whether the old customers are going to agree to a revised date and give a consent for change. That's one challenge. The other challenge was enforcement of its mortgage, which is happening. Recently, the Bombay High Court in one of the matters very clearly laid down that if there is a charge on the land of the developer by the lender, I think his rights are superior to the charge of other flat buyers. So I think there's a good cause for lenders to look at that. So I think as we see, law will be evolved either by RERA or by the government, or we will see some good judgments from the high courts. So that is one area we look at. The third element I will look in the entire chain of stakeholders is the buyers. Usually you see buyers coming back to the forum for either lack of delay in possession or false promises being made. For that, they come to the court. And again, the Bombay High Court recently came very heavily on developers who don't do it and went for attachment of their bank assets of the individual developers and other projects and said you can't sell them unless you pay back those. So I think if you look at it, there are areas where either the judicial precedents make change or the government has volunteered, or in certain cases, the RERA themselves with various ongoing circulars, orders and clarification makes changes from time to time. So these, I believe, are some of the aspects which one can look at it. At the same time, if I look at a challenge, I still believe that the RERA, MahaRERA at least, is the extended another 6 months grant was given the 6th August order. However, it still exempts the customers from approaching the court. That issue has been left open. So I think there are areas which will definitely be a challenge. But I think as we move forward and the courts will appreciate the current status of pandemic, I think we will look forward to better developments in this field. And that's the say for me for the time being, and I'll come back later.
Thank you, Shrivals. Any thoughts, Rajivan, you have on this issue? I think Shrivals has pointed out a very relevant issue which is yet to be decided. But as we progress, I'm sure we'll have an answer to that. Any thoughts on RERA steps?
Yeah, so Shrivals has covered many points. Some of the point which is not covered into apart from the RERA. Okay, RERA. The mitigating, whatever they extended twice the project completion period, once in the last year's March 15 to September 14, and again now in the August, again from the April to October is extended. But RERA is also, and apart from one side, they have given a lot of support to the developers. In the, MahaRERA, particularly MahaRERA, come out with a lot of circular in last couple of months, 2-3 months. They have come out many circulars, making the regulation really, in tightening. It's good, I would say, but it's the time is not the correct. Okay, because the pandemic period, everybody is facing the problem. All the stakeholders are facing the problems. But having said, RERA come out with a lot of circulars saying that you have to disclose us to now the sold apartment in a particular format, and you have to keep updating that, which is should include the registration number of the AFS. That's one. Plus, they have come out with another circular saying that now we have to disclose the FSI. And typically in Maharashtra, the FSI has the CC and other thing has been released from time to time. So that aspect has to be disclosed. And they keep on sending, I'm sure they're sending reminders to say that the execution of the conveyance of the building structure as per the RERA requirement. So the lands and the common area should be supposed to be handed over to the apex body, but the building has to be conveyed to the society. The society itself, they are saying we don't want that because it is impacting twice the stamp duty. Once the building structure is conveyed to the society. The whatever the stamp duty they paid on agreement for sale, that is get adjusted. But thereafter, when you go for the conveyance to the apex body, there could be a stamp duty is coming, but there is no adjustment available. So it's a balanced way. One thing, yes, Maharera and many, even Karnataka RERA, Tamil Nadu RERA, they also come out with some kind of mitigating to this pandemic period. But I would say apart from that, the states like Maharashtra, they come out with really a supportive. For example, they come out with the scheme, such 50% benefit, the option given to the developers to avail the 50% benefit, because there are so many premiums payable in Maharashtra, say the I2R premium, or we would say the ULC premium or Senate premium, fungible premium. So government has given an option to the developers to avail the benefit 50% up to 31st December 2021, with a condition that if you are availing that the benefit, you have to pass on the stamp duty to the customers. So it is good. Some of the developers have exercised that opted this option, but it's to be tested how it will be beneficial to the customers as well as the developers, because there is no mechanism like MRP system, that the product is this much, whether the premium has inbuilt or not, etc. So having said, yes, the government of Maharashtra, apart from the government of India, government of Maharashtra, Maharera has supported in this pandemic period to all the stakeholders.
Right, that's helpful. Thank you, Rajivan. Moving on to the next point. Every industry is facing problems, financial issues, whether it is our Bollywood or maybe cement industry. Similarly, I think even real estate and infrastructure has suffered a lot, and it is expected, right or wrong, from the government to come and support. But it is at the same time important that you can't expect government to provide you 100% comfort, because even government has some restrictions. They can't have financial support for everyone. Our resources don't allow us to do that. But still, because right or wrong, developers would still be looking at government to support. So do you think, Gopal, government has provided some support or some financial imputers or some sort of benefits to this sector to revive the real estate or infrastructure sector? Any thoughts?
Well, I must say, from August onwards, maybe July or August onwards, government has really stepped in some way or the other. First, it was the moratorium that they had announced, and there was a huge relief to the developers, to the, of course, the lenders were on the receiving end, but the developers, the purchasers, the buyers, they had really been benefited out of the moratorium that was granted by the Government of India, which RBI had issued instructions that the banks also extended those benefits to all the parties that were affected. The second thing that came in August was the reduction in the stamp duty, huge, massive, I must say, that was announced by the Government of Maharashtra as also by the Government of Karnataka. And to be fair, I know also I think a couple of cesses that were imposed. There was a reduction in the rates over there. The premiums were reduced by 50%. And I must say, to be fair, that these small measures, we may call it a small measure, but it has really helped revive the real estate industry during that particular period of time. We've really seen a good traction, both from the purchasers, from the bankers, and from all and sundry, helping revive the real estate industry to a great extent. Of course, as a developer or a person representing the developer or maybe even the buyer, much more is expected. But I think and this really helped in revive. As a stakeholder, I would expect that they would have continued it at least till the next financial year, these kind of benefits, as is being, I think, done in the other countries. That's what I would really expect. Similarly, on the GST, probably as some more, I would say, reduction in the GST composition scheme would have been announced. That would have really helped real estate sector to a great extent. Of course, I'm not expecting the input tax credit benefit to come in because already the composition scheme is in place. But if a further reduction in the composition scheme would have really helped us a lot in the real estate sector.
Okay. No, thank you, Gopal. That's helpful. So moving on. So my question to Gopal was more on voluntary compensation by government. But I think at the same time, we also need to look at involuntary compensation from government, which is because of, say, non-compliances or maybe because increase in prices of the raw material cost. Now, let us look at these road concessions. Because of lockdown, there has been very less toll collection charges, collection, because of which revenue is affected. Now, whether government is responsible for force majeure, whether they are responsible for change in law, that to my mind is still to be tested. But that is a loss which government will have to compensate under contractual dispute or under other disputes. Similarly, where contracts were entered into with government for whatever supplies, the prices have gone up and there is no price variation clause. Now, whether government should compensate or not compensate, whether those suppliers have to claim change in law or they have to claim force majeure or maybe frustration. So that those all questions are yet to be assessed because I don't think loss has been assessed so far. I think it will still take a year or two to figure out how much losses we have suffered, how many companies have been affected. So, Shrival, my question to you is: have you come across problems
I'd like to just add one small
Gopal,
pointer
sure.
on this. Is that in Delhi, some of the tenants did make an application to the courts and claiming force majeure. It didn't come to the rescue of the tenants. Also, they said that they were governed by the contractual obligations, and now they cannot, I would say, enforce the claim of force majeure in such a circumstance, having regard to the fact that they are capable of using the premises. So this is one aspect, of course, where as far as the tenants are concerned. But coming to your query, that the concessionaires are really, really affected both by the increase in the cost of the raw material, the delay in the delivery, and all that stuff. Probably these are untested areas. Yeah, Steve.
Let's hear from Shrival.
Yeah, thanks, Dinesh and Gopal. So I would say that there are three buckets I look at it. The first is issues of frustration of contract. The second would be how do you interpret the force majeure clauses? Secondly, in a lease agreement, and thirdly, in a leave and license agreement. So taking the leave and license agreement first, I think the law is governed by Section 52 of the Eastment Act. What is a license? From there, one has to look at it whether the license can be revoked under the specific subsections of Section 62, whether the property in question has been damaged or the purpose of the license have been defeated. So the first issue that comes is whether do these agreement of leave and license have any force majeure clause inbuilt, which give idea whether in event of anything happening, whether there is an option to terminate or not. So first you go with that clause. In absence thereof, one has to go to the specific requirement of the section, and there you get the benefit whether you are over there or not. Having said that, I think the law on this issue is clear that in respect of either lease or in leave and license, a special law will prevail over the general law, which clearly enumerated by the Supreme Court in the Raja Drupdev Chand's case, which clearly provided that. Based on that, the second issue, when you look at a lease also, which I think majority of either corporates or even real estate entities had, the section 108 clearly provides that only when the premises is substantially, wholly or substantially unfit for use, only then, or it's not practically to be used, only then there is a chance for a lessee to come back and say, no, I'm not going to pay the rentals for that period. The challenge is that during this COVID period, we have to look at a situation. First, we have to look at each contract separately because the facts of the case are different. What is the language of the force majeure clause one has to look at? Having said that, the most important aspect I have seen is that the COVID itself put a same draft of a contract differently, because in respect of the government allowing part usage of a premises, at one end you have offices and warehouses were permitted to use it at a reduced level, say 25% staff, 30% staff, you still could use it. Whereas in a mall, an entire shop could not be used, the entire mall was sealed. So on the same draft of a clause, one has to look at differently at the facts of the case. The way I would interpret the things would be: number one, look at the clause in the agreement and interpret whether there is a termination option, suspension option, whether an intimation is mandatory, and to look at that. Thereafter, one has to look at is whether I can enforce this under the specific law under the matter. And lastly, if nothing comes, the best solution would be to renegotiate, go back to the lessor or licensee and say, look, this is not possible to happen. And the fact remains that in these pandemic times, you may not get a new landlord also or new lessee also. So in that case, one has to look at the option and see, suppose the rental is 20,000 a month. If I leave my premises for 2 months and I look for a new tenant, I'm going to lose 40,000. Where if I renegotiate with my existing tenant and reduce by 2,000 rupees, I'm still better off. So I think commercial wisdom has to overrule the legal merit. So I think that's one thing one has to look at it. The last aspect which I want to touch is frustration of contract. I think the law is clear on that point. One has to look at it where under section 32, the discharge of the performance is envisaged in the contract in case of any such issues, or the foundation of the contract has been upset by this pandemic in the scheme of the things. These two under section 56 and section 32 of the Contract Act will decide how it will happen. And there is a Supreme Court judgment of Energy Watchdog which clearly provides how to address this issue. So if I have to look back and say, yes, there are going to be challenges, the leave and license and the lease issues are very minor issues, and both High Court of Bombay and Delhi and other courts interpreted very well and gave solutions to people. Last issue of the larger issue of, concessionaire agreements, toll, whether it's an airport concession, all those of things where they have deadlines and penalties and bank guarantee enforcements. I think that will be tested in the long run, as you rightly said. And I will see that there would be, in my view, reinterpretation of the judgments to look from the perspective of commercial wisdom, of continuity of business versus the impact of these law. Thanks.
No, I appreciate Shivar's, that is useful perspective. Thank you.
Yeah.
I think moving on to some again RERA issues. Praveen, do you think after completing these 5 years of RERA, what according to you are the strategic and policy shifts to unlock the true potential of RERA? Any thoughts, Praveen?
Sure. So thanks, Dinesh. And I'd say that after 5 years, and I think a lot was expected from this legislation, and a lot has definitely been achieved. I still believe that it is one of the most technology advanced legislations for a sector where you can have an entire registration process done online. And we've seen that in COVID, where there have been launches where right from the filing to the registration certificate, there's been no physical meeting with the Maharashtra RERA, and registration certificates are being provided in record time. So it really goes to show how much future ready this legislation is for this sector. So that has really progressed, but there is a lot of scope for improvement if we talk of execution of orders, or we talk of reasoned orders or contradictory judgments. These still need to be looked at, and I think a lot is more desired to be achieved in that segment. Similarly, if you look at the appellate tribunals, if you take last year's numbers itself of 2020, I'd say only around, 17 states and UTs have a permanent appellate tribunal, while states like Telangana, Goa, Gujarat, which are reasonably advanced states, there are only interim arrangements. And then other states with Himachal and Kerala, where there are a lot of projects that are taking place, are yet to even set up an appellate tribunal. Now, I think 5 years after a legislation, if we're still at a tribunal setup stage, there is a lot more scope. The other problem from a buyer's perspective, Dinesh, and there's a lot of feedback that I see in various sessions that I speak at, is there is no central repository. So if somebody really wants to search across multiple projects, across different states, that's really not available. A lot of circulars continue to be in local language, making it difficult from a buyer who's in another state to really understand what is the provision before proceeding to purchase. So yes, that's how it is. And I'd say probably if at this point, while all of us have substantially spoken with your extensive experience at BSK Legal, if you want to add a few thoughts, that would be great.
Well, I think it's, as you said, the constitution of tribunal is really important. And I think it's time now to implement all that rather than just theoretically provided in these acts. So I think some efforts are required to move forward. I completely agree with you.
Just to add what Praveen is really sorry. So apart from what Praveen shown, that thing, that title insurance is no. I mean, government should actually take it seriously, because it really, it will be, if it is title insurance comes, it will be definitely a very good for the real estate, and it is for all stakeholders, I would say, even for the buyers and the developers and even bankers. So that government should emphasize on and give importance to ensure that the title insurance is even the insurance company and all other mechanisms should be brought into very quickly.
Oh, thank you, Rajiv. And in fact, do you think some relaxation is also required in timelines for registration? Because I think that is something which is also troubling buyers and sellers as well. Thoughts on that, Rajiv?
Registration definitely is extension of the timeline may not be the answer, because most into we are to digitalization. So across India, the digitalization should be made digitalization rather than the people visiting to the HR office. No, I mean, initially in Mumbai it was initiated, but government should emphasize us to make it a digital insurance, so across. So that would be one of the most important, I would say, rather than extending the timeline for registrations. Okay. Apart from what I would say, that stamp duty. The stamp duty, the government of Maharashtra is, Gopalji said, the government of Maharashtra reduced from September to December from 5% to 2%, thereafter January to 31st March from 5% to 3%. And that tends lot of in the registration, I remember in the month of December, Mumbai itself, near about 19,500 registration happened. So people are encouraged, and the sector was encouraged that time. So government of Maharashtra, that the stamp duty reduction, that kind of benefit actually really required to be extended to revive this, and especially in this pandemic period, the extension or coming out with the reduction of the stamp duty, which was earlier given, that should be, I think, reintroduced. Okay, that's one. Not only in Maharashtra. Only I think the stamp duty in the reductions happens in even that time only in Maharashtra and some parts in Karnataka. I would say that across India, the reduction of stamp duty on property should be reduced, because the experience what we have seen in Maharashtra and during the month from September to 31st March, okay, it's encouraging. That kind of the decision, if any other state governments also takes, should be definitely, it will be a good decision for the sector, real estate sector. That's one. Second, that is, if you see that only in Maharashtra, the stamp duty is paid at the time of agreement for sale. Okay, if you look into rest of the countries, most of the states, the stamp duty is paid at the time of the sale deed is executed. Means the project is ready, the either occupation certificate or completion certificates are obtained, then the stamp duty is paid. In Maharashtra, the stamp duty is paid in advance, and at the time of execution of the agreement for sale, the stamp duty required to be paid. So, and also the section 13 now, the section 13 of RERA is made it very clear. If the developer wants to collect more than 10%, the agreement for sale is required to be executed and registered. So if that system, that is like what is doing in Maharashtra, like at the time of agreement itself, you register the property and pay the stamp duty. If that cases is introduced to all other states also, strictly if the RERA provision is implemented, then all other states' revenue will also come in advance. If so, there's a scope for the reduction of the stamp duty by other states. So one has to look in, of course, the stamp duty, one of the main income for all the state government and local bodies. So reduction of the stamp duty, by they are reducing the stamp duty, they should also ensure that the fund is also coming every year on time. So if they reduce the stamp duty, I'm sure that is the kind of encouragement happen in Maharashtra. The people will come forward and will have a lot of sales happening, and the volume increases, the revenue also will be increased. So if the government take a decision, or other state government take a decision to reduce the stamp duty, it will be a win-win situation. Thank you.
No, that's helpful, and I hope the state authorities are listening to you, Rajivan, and they implement in other states as well. Yeah, Shrivalsh.
So Dinesh, just want to add to the point which Rajivan raised is the with respect to the payment of stamp duty. I think the concept of paying or getting the agreement registered before collecting more than 10% is a very good thing for the consumers per se, the buyers, so that their rights are protected. The balance can be done if suppose a person defaults in his agreement and cancels the agreement, the stamp duty of that should be carried forward to the next purchase. So that for every property, only once a stamp duty is paid at the first instance when the first sale is happening. So I think that will also take away the pain of the developer in case of the customer defaults. I think then till the first sale possession happening, n number of transaction happen, the stamp duty remains one because the property is not passed hand at the possession level. I think that could be one way out wherein the stamp duty aspect of the state is protected from a revenue perspective. At the same time, neither the customer or the developer is put to a loss at that level.
That's helpful. Thank you, Shrivalsh. Moving on to the last questions because we don't have much time left. All of us agree that some more efforts are required by government. And I will just give my perspective before I pass on to my co-speakers. I think government has to learn from last 1.5 years. And as I was in the beginning, that there were contracts where there was no price variation clause and the inputs cost has gone by 400%. Government has to provide these price variation clauses in all agreements now. I understand that agreements relating to Jal Jeevan Bhavan, I mean, those millions of those contracts which are being coming out, and those contracts are not for 2 or 3 months, they are for 2 to 3 years. Government is still not providing for those price variation formulas, because of which foreign investors are not inclined to bid. Similarly, even when RFP for passenger trains came, when they were privatizing these passenger trains, we saw there was a lot of interest in the RFQ. Almost 30 bidders bid for it, but when RFP came, there were only 2 bidders. One, I don't remember, the other one, IRCTC, again a railway company. So I would say only one bidder submitted the bid. Now, if you want to really revive the infrastructure and real estate, government has to make serious efforts to it. On contract, they need to have proper bankable documents so that they learn from mistakes and people are willing to invest. We're talking about 6 trillions of contracts and PPP projects being given under this monetization plan. But if you don't have these robust contracts and government doesn't improve the proper bankability and structures of these contracts, it'll be difficult to revive. Similarly, on those lines, starting with Praveen, do you think any suggestions for government that they should do to revive generally real estate and infrastructure sector?
Yes, thank you, Dinesh. I think the present laws really do not address the issues that are faced by construction and infrastructure, companies, because of the complexity of the transaction and the technological advancement that has taken place in construction. As a country, we really don't have a unified construction law. We just operate on a consolidation of various statutes. I think this is the time that we really need to look at. There are best practices that can really adopt from, so not a cumbersome process to put that unified construction law in place. If you take the UK Construction Act or the UK False Claims Act, they all have great provisions. I mean, just to give the audience an example, if you take, say, the UK Construction Act, it does have a slip rule which allows an adjudicator to correct typos or clerical errors, which are based on accident omission, which we lose a lot of time in litigation because of these very issues. There is in the UK the False Claims Act, where there are interesting provisions which they penalize over invoicing, or a whistleblower is entitled to 25% of the claim amount. And especially in the Indian context, which is a huge problem, I would say, is that hidden materials substitution. There is a use of substandard material in construction of the project. That is the common complaint across all developers where there are leakages, etc. And all of this relates back to the contract with the contractor, his choice of materials, when you can really claim damages, what is treated as completely substantially different from what was contracted for. All of these litigation points have been extensively looked into by other countries which are more advanced than us, and they already have provisions. So I think it's time to really give boost to this sector by getting into a unified construction law, which not just addresses consumer issues, which RERA does, but there is a lot from the developer's perspective which needs to be addressed on the contracting side, which now needs to be looked into if we have to really look at a huge shift in the sector.
Thank you. That's helpful. Gopal, your two bits to it.
From the government perspective, I would always say that, on the tax front, if they could rationalize it in some manner which would really, help boost the economy, the real estate sector, as well as infrastructure sector. One of the way would be, as I'll just extending the proposition that was made by Srivals, is that, the property is same. When you sell it again and again, whatever the stamp duty that has earlier been paid, credit to that of the stamp duty that has already been paid must be given, and only on the incremental cost the stamp duty should be levied. So I think that would really help a lot people accepting the real estate. And as it is, India is very much under-owned country. People don't own real estate, and to own a piece of real estate is a dream for everyone. So maybe one of the ways to revive it, it can be done in this particular manner.
I just add to what is one more, one point.
No, your turn only, Rajivan.
Yeah, only one point. Okay. See, like in a couple of years ago, the government, to increase if you're holding the listed company shares more than 1 year, no capital gain tax, which now since last 1 or 2 years, it is changed into. So that kind of proposition for the real estate also the government bring into, okay, if you're holding the apartment or a real estate for say 1 or 2 years, and thereafter if you sell, no capital gain, so then there'll be a lot of scope for increasing strengthening this business, real estate sector. So government should think about that mechanism also, for at least for the next couple of years, maybe for next not for 5 years. To stabilize the whatever, to again come back to the 2005 when the real estate to boom very 2005 to 8 is a good period. So bring back the same period, this kind of something relaxation is the government should bring it.
Hope at least the government of God is listening to you and we are back on track. Over to you, Srivals, last words.
Okay, so I would say by starting with my experience in telecom, media, airports, and other sectors, I think regulation is always good for any sector. You see a lot of transparency, and with a regulated set of laws, I think the FDI investments increases a lot. I think that's one thing you say with an uncertain, unregulated sector, always better for investors to come. So I think that's the first big point. Secondly, there's always some scope for improvement. I think one important thing which I see in other sectors, which is slightly missing in the real estate, is the participation by all the stakeholders to contribute in the consultation process. Like in telecom media, I believe any new change of regulation or policy comes, it is put for a public consultation process, which currently is lacking in the RERA sector, in the real estate sector, where we just get the guidelines or the orders or clarifications without anything. So I think that's one important change that will happen, and I require participation for all of us. Secondly, any regulated sectors has a swing from being completely strictly regulated to a forbearance, right? There is a range. And as we move forward, the change happens. It all depends on the mind of a regulator, how he wants to move from being a strict regulator to forbearance, or he wants to do a scope creep and increase the area. So I may always envisage that there is some hidden fear in the minds of maybe developers that tomorrow the RERA authorities may also step into tariff regulation, where they will say what should they charge for, at the time of possession, whether there are other advance charges collected, what could be the cap on that, what could be the corpus one, club charges you charge. I think that could be one area where if they come from a customer perspective, they may still look at, but from an industry perspective, that could lead to a lot of things. And one has to realize that the segments within the real estate range from an affordable sector to an inspirational to a luxury to ultra luxury. So making a law without engaging with stakeholders could lead to wrong implications on the field. So I think one important thing is we all need to engage with regulators, bring facts. I think that is more important, because any legislation, more so regulatory, has to have an economic backup in terms of data, which I will always an inhibition from the players to share the data. I think that is one important area which I feel that if we all contribute to that, the sector would definitely develop and as we move forward. So I think that's one big point I will say is the contribution that the sector can do by engaging with the regulators.
Thank you, Srivals. Thank you. I think that is all really helpful. And I think we have already crossed our time limit. I think we should not hold our participants on a weekend Friday night from their drinks. So I think we should close here. And I think it was lovely talking to all these speakers. Thoroughly enjoyed it. And Shikhar, thank you so much for giving us opportunity. I hope everybody enjoyed it and maybe some stakeholders were listening to us and maybe able to even take a couple of suggestions from the discussion. Maybe there'll be some contribution by all of us for these infrastructure and real estate sectors. Thank you so much.